Hi, I'm Erin Meese,
And I'm Kristen Ireland.
and we're the co-founders of PeopleSpark Consulting.
Welcome to our podcast, The People Spark, helping ag leaders step out of the weeds with clarity and confidence.
We'll leave a little spark.
So I am excited, Erin, about the topic that we're going to talk about today. Up until this point, we've really talked about, I would say, longer term or bigger picture items. We're talking about the culture of the organization and the values of the organization. And then we talk about the goals and how you start to define the goals that really drive the behaviors, right? Those to me are those longer term, bigger picture. And now we're starting to move into what do you need to do in your business to support those things? That's where you wanted to go. Now it's what do you need to do in your business to make sure that everybody's headed that direction, that you're on the right road headed there. And one of the things that we've started to see as we work with businesses is this is where we start to get some of the pushback. In the previous kind of the values, the goals, what we have found with business leaders is they know it in their heads. It's a matter of translating a lot of that out. Where this tends to be where leaders start to feel uncomfortable. And you came up with a great analogy. So if you could talk a little bit about the analogy and the story that really led to that, of leaders feeling that discomfort.
Absolutely. So I think, if you're spot on. This is exactly where we see pushback from leaders. And I would remember being on a call with a leader, gosh, a couple years ago now. And what we were talking about was, okay, if this is where you want to take your business, then we also need to look at how to structure your organization such that it's going to be able to deliver on those goals and deliver on those objectives. And one of this leader's biggest concerns, I mean, almost immediately was, oh, whoa, 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 whoa. I don't want people to say, this isn't my job. Like immediately thinking that if it's not on my job description, that somebody will say, it's not my job. I don't have to do it. Because how that business had grown to this point had been by way of everybody helping out and all hands on deck to try to make sure that we were going to make this business successful. And he was nervous that any sort of structure or formalizing a title or formalizing that job description was going to take away from that initiative and take away from that energy that had been so key to the business getting to where it had been at that point. And so in that discussion, I just remember, I don't know how it came up, but I said, listen, I want you to picture a continuum. So from one end of the continuum to the other. And on one end of it, I want you to picture a cowboy, right? Not a lot of rules, not a lot of structure. We're doing whatever needs to be done. And on the other end of that continuum, I want you to picture corporate and everything that you've talked to me about what you don't want in your business, of the bureaucracy, of the inability to make decisions, of the it's not my job, right? So on this end of the continuum, I want you to think of like the corporate, like the really the stereotypical version that many of us probably have in our brains when we think about corporate and use the air quotes to it. On this continuum, I am not saying that we need to move from cowboy, no structure in place, all the way over here at all. What I'm saying is that moving from having very little of that structure in place today and moving just a little bit further over to the side where we're defining roles, we're defining how decisions are getting made, we're getting clarity around who is doing what, while also honoring, like what we talked about before, the values that you're saying are important of we are a team and we're going to make sure that as a team, we're helping out our customer. So this continuum has been a very helpful visual that I've noticed that a lot of leaders have um, have really nodded their heads with as I've shared it with them, right? We're not moving from one to the other. It's not a light switch. We're simply shifting to add more structure into it to provide some of that clarity that may not exist in their business today.
Well, and that's what I find, that's what I love about that continuum is one, it provides a visual to the pushback that we see. And I am amazed at how many times people will talk about being corporate. So what you're not seeing is we are using air quotes because that's what we do, is that there is that concern about being corporate. And there is a difference about corporate, which is, in my mind, kind of process for the sake of process, which is different than building enough structure to enable where you want to go. And I'm using this analogy, and Aaron, I think this is your analogy, right? That we start with a path, like a walking path. And that's kind of when we're more on the corporate or the cowboy side of that continuum. It's more like a walking path. And as we move a little bit closer to provide that structure, it's okay, now it's going to be a gravel road. It makes it
Mm.
easier to travel. It makes sure people are headed in the same direction. Then maybe at some point we pave it, right? When the business is at a point where we have enough people on the road that it makes sure that we have it paved, which is different than saying we are going to go to like big city. You need stoplights, you need, all of that. It's providing enough foundation and direction that it makes it easy for people to do what we want it to do. It makes it easier to find that destination. We talked about the walking in circles, right? Makes it easier to get to that destination when there is a defined path. And maybe it's paved so you don't twist your ankle when you're walking on it. That just took the analogy too far.
I like the analogy. It's not mine. I like it though. I do
Oh,
like
well,
it.
then I wonder where we got it.
I like it. Well, and I think when we think of structure too, there's more to it than I think what we gravitate towards
Mm,
initially. So,
hmm
what I hear a lot when we start talking about structure with organizations and with leaders is I start thinking about boxes on an org chart.
Yes.
I've got to put
Yes.
this role or this person, and they have to be on the org chart, and that's kind of where I wipe my hands of it, and that's now what somebody needs to do. Can you speak a little bit, Kristen, to kind of what all goes into structure?
Mm. Well, and one thing that I find fascinating is we'll sit down and talk about, okay, here's where you want to go. Here are your values. Here are your goals and your business
Mhm.
strategy. And then people start to look at structure something different. It's like they set it aside and
Yep.
then they sit down and start to put, as you said, boxes on the org chart, when this process is really about translating it. So if our bigger picture goal is to increase sales by 10% or increase the number of new customers that we have, or we have one business that we're working with right now where they're running a convenience store. It's increasing foot
Mhm.
traffic into the store, counting the people that are coming into the store. That if that's the bigger picture, making sure that we're translating that into what roles we need. So we're starting to look at it and say, okay, if our goal is to increase foot traffic, what are the kind of the bite-sized goals underneath that? What are the responsibilities? What are the roles that we need to have to achieve that? And so many times we're not making that connection between this is where I want to go and this is how I'm going to define the path through roles and jobs to be able to get there.
Did you know that contrary to what we might think, 96% of employees want feedback, whether it's constructive or recognition? Yet another survey found that only 5% of managers provide critical feedback to employees, even though it's important for their development. What's behind this? Nearly half of managers, 44%, find giving feedback stressful. Nearly a quarter, 21%, avoid giving it altogether. They feel it's uncomfortable, they don't want to demotivate employees, and just aren't sure how to do it. And the repercussions of not giving feedback end up impacting you and your business through lower productivity and profitability, decreased employee engagement, and increased employee turnover. I'm Erin Meese with People Spark Consulting. For the last several years, we've built our business around supporting ag supervisors and managers develop their coaching and feedback skills. Why? Because leaders coaching their teams create more engaged teams, And these more engaged teams create the workplaces that bring more employees into the ag industry. Our leadership transformation program was designed to be straightforward and practical, providing content in digestible chunks, supporting participants through personalized feedback, and providing participants an environment to learn with other ag leaders across the industry. You might only have a couple of managers or supervisors, or you might have an entire team of them. PeopleSpark works with you to find the best solution, whether it's joining an open cohort with other ag leaders or having a customized experience that works across your locations. In order to provide the most customized experience for each of our participants, these cohorts have very limited number of seats available each month. If you're interested in more information around what might work best for you and your team, just click on the link in the show notes below or directly go to developagleaders.com. Well, and I think, what you were speaking to there too is such a good example of, okay, if this is our objective, increasing store traffic, the question becomes less about kind of what are the boxes on the org chart and more about, okay, what do I need? What team do I need? What players on this team do I need to have in what positions in order to make that happen? And you've got a couple of examples too I'm thinking of a client a couple
Mm.
years ago where this was a really helpful exercise.
Well, so I feel like this is fascinating no matter what. I'll give a couple of examples, but to be quite honest, Erin, I'm not sure exactly which example you're thinking about. So I'm going to throw out mine and then we'll see if we're headed in the same way. So we were working with a co-op a few years ago. And what we were hearing in this pain point for the co-op, which is similar to what we've heard with other co-ops that we've worked with, is our best opportunity to grow is to cross-sell between divisions. Is that the one you were thinking
It
about?
was, yep.
And this was so powerful. So actually in this case, this was a small co-op, one location co-op. And through the strategy discussions, we started to talk about what is your differentiator? Why are people going to come to you versus other businesses in the area? And the comment that I heard from the GM is we know our customers well because they're only coming to one spot. So we all know them and know them well. And I said, great. It's wonderful to have that as a differentiator, especially in an industry where relationships are so important. I said, where is your biggest opportunity? And his biggest opportunity was we're selling, right? We're in agronomy. We're selling seed. We're not getting their grain. Or we're getting their grain. We're not selling them agronomy. And then they had feed. So there were opportunities to be able to cross-sell between divisions. And I don't even like to call them divisions because that starts it already of these business units. So their big goal was to increase the number of members that are using each of their different business units. That was their strategy. Everybody was bought on. When we started to get into the structure, then we had a business manager or a business unit manager that was specific for agronomy, one that was specific for feed, one that was specific for grain. And the way those roles were structured and defined was essentially if I am successful in my department, that's how I make the overall co-op successful. So my goal is to make my business unit as successful as possible. That's how the roles had been structured. That's how it had been communicated. Those were the metrics that they were working on, which pulls everybody in a different direction. We're saying, here is the gravel path to our destination that we want to go to, and the paved roads are heading a different place. So we started to talk about if our goal is to cross-sell, if our goal is success by having a larger number of customers that are buying from each of the different business units, how are we structuring roles to do that? What connections do we need to have between those business unit leaders? What are the metrics that we need to focus on? The number of members that are buying from each of the different business units. What information, now this is starting to get a little bit further, but what information needs to be shared? How are we defining success? Because it was pulling in two very different directions. And And one of the analogies that I will use here too, because I just listed this for somebody else, is, and this is analogy from, I'm not good at remembering the book title. Erin's going to have to tell me the book title, of, is your team playing golf or is your team playing basketball?
Hmm.
What book is that from?
That is from,
I'm throwing her a loop. She didn't know I was going to ask her this.
um,
Okay.
it's not five dysfunctions of a team. It's that,
It's
it's a
the same
Lencioni.
author.
It's Lencioni, and it's one of the more recent books. I'll look it up on my
See,
Kindle.
there you go. She's got it. She's the best one at this. I can remember the quotes. She can remember what book they come from. And so many times, our goals as an organization is to play basketball where we're all on the same team. And team success is how we are involving each of the different players. When so many, so that's our strategy. And so many structures are set up like a golf team where you do best. The better you do, the better you help your team. So we're playing basketball, or our strategy is to play basketball, and yet we're structured to play golf.
The Advantage.
The Advantage by Patrick Lencioni. So that to me is that great analogy of, we're set up one way, our strategy is something different.
Yeah. Well, there's one thing I wanna come back to because you mentioned it in the last example around structure, because structure
Mhm.
is more than the boxes on the org charts. One of the things that you spoke to there that I wanna dig into further is defining the role and defining how to structure the
Mm.
role, right? So, I think we mentioned on one of the previous podcasts the top 2 sexiest parts of HR, one being handbook,
Mhm.
one being job descriptions. And
Oh,
job descriptions, for being as sexy as they really are critical to be able to help define what that structure looks like, what those responsibilities are when it comes to supporting that organization's goals and objectives. And I think there's a few things that oftentimes will come across people's minds. This is when they glaze over immediately hearing the word job description. Ugh, right? All other duties as assigned is something that they probably are immediately thinking of, and it's just a task list of what needs to be done. Where what I have found a lot of value in for clients and, for their teams as well is digging further than that in their job descriptions. So,
mhm.
thinking about even how we work with them. So once we understand what those strategies are, whether that's cross-selling it across the other business units, whether it's increasing foot traffic, what we do with that information then flows into how those job descriptions are set up. Because I think when an organization does this really well, they're very closely connecting those strategies into what the structure of that job description looks like so that they can connect each individually employee and team member to what that business is trying to do.
So, yes, job descriptions are sexy, which also means, there, see, what you're not seeing is the look that Erin gave me just now. What that also means is, I think that we should have that as our next episode topic of, what
Mm.
does it really look like? So as we take that from, I'm totally gonna work my gravel to paved road analogy here, that when we're getting to job descriptions, we're paving the
Mhm.
road. And paving the road doesn't mean that you're paving the road to a different direction. You're paving the road to where you want to go, which
Right.
includes not undercutting the strategy and the culture, which was the hesitation that
Mhm.
that the business leader had earlier.
Before we end our show, let me leave you with a question. What would it feel like to leave the office every day Not just knowing that your managers and supervisors had everything under control, but that you were confident that the direction they were giving your team members was creating and reinforcing the kind of great culture in your business that the entire community talked about. The kind of culture where customers went out of their way to work with you instead of the competition, because they were cared for, consistent, and kind. If that sounds like the ag business you've always wanted, stick with me for just another minute. Too many ag business owners and general managers, yes, even the big ones, find themselves stuck. They're juggling customer questions that their leaders should be able to handle and somehow ending up as the bottleneck of decision-making in their own business. It feels like they can never get out of the day-to-day long enough to develop their talent, their business, and their own future. Sound familiar? You've worked hard to get where you are, but staying stuck here isn't sustainable. Not only that, it's costing you time, energy, and future growth. The good news, you don't have to figure this out all alone. That's why we offer you the opportunity to schedule a free culture development session. This no obligation, no pressure call is your chance to explore whether our programs are the right fit for you. Our programs have helped ag businesses across the U.S. like you to build great work teams and cultures, retain great employees, and develop plans for your business's success, all while freeing up more time for you. When you schedule your free culture development session, here's what you'll get: a personalized conversation with an expert advisor who's seen firsthand what it takes to break through barriers and achieve the culture and outcomes you're seeking. The opportunity to see how our programs can help you define your business and people strategies, and actionable insights tailored to your goals so you can start moving towards the business you've always envisioned. If you're ready to stop spinning your wheels and start building the ag business you deserve, here's what to do next. Visit this link in the show notes and book your free culture development session today. Don't wait, the next big breakthrough might be just one conversation away. Thanks for listening to today's episode.
I vote we leave this as a cliffhanger. So this is going to be our cliffhanger.
Absolutely.
I know people are sitting on the edges of their seats now waiting for our next episode where we talk about how we transition from strategy and building that into the job descriptions, exactly what you talked about.
Awesome.
Do you think people actually see this as a cliffhanger? Because I do.
Well, and I think where we'll go to is talking about even the other component here around decision making, which is another
Yes.
really important part of defining what the organization structure looks like. So if I were to think then about that one thing, so from today's
yes, we need our one
episode,
thing.
for our
Mhm.
one thing, what I would
Mhm.
challenge each listener here to think about is consider how your existing structure, here's the challenge. The challenge is two parts. One, take names out of your head for a moment and just think about the title that you have people in within your business. How does your structure today support what you have set up and established as your business's goals and objectives? How is it doing that today? How isn't it doing that today? And get specific. The goal here is to identify, are there some potential gaps? Are all of these roles
Mhm.
connected to my strategy? Right? You're still going to have administrative functions. Are your administrative functions supporting your business strategy? How so? Do you have the manpower? Do you have the workforce aligned around the parts of your business that you're saying are the most important? So those are the kinds of things I want you to look for then in that one thing this week.
And I love how you say that. If it sounds really easy, take the names off the org chart. And yet, or take the names out of the boxes, take the names out of your head, and how hard that really is to do that. So that's a bigger challenge than what it sounds like.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, and with that, I want to thank you for joining us today. Please like and subscribe, and we will see you on our next episode of the People Spark podcast. This has been the People Spark podcast. We hope you've enjoyed today's episode, and we look forward to bringing you more. The best way you can support us is by liking and subscribing this podcast wherever you subscribe to your podcasts.
Thank you so much for hanging with us today. we are looking forward to continuing the conversations with all of you.